an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering The Magician's Guild by Trudy Canavan, brought to you by Ashley, chapters 8 through 11. In these chapters, Sonea practices her magic without great success, and in doing so, draws the magicians right down on her head. I'm really enjoying specific parts of this book that I'm going to get into. Thank you for commissioning this, Ashley. Welcome to Spoil Me. All right, everybody, welcome to the show. My name is Natasha, and this section, when I talk about, those of you who listen to my other podcasts, the other Unspoiled shows that I do, something that I frequently cite as a huge pet peeve is when people don't behave in the way that people would behave. And by that, I mean they don't ask the questions that any of us would be asking in a certain situation. They don't make the assumptions that I think most people would make in certain situations. And it can be a contrivance to get certain aspects of the plot to fall into place when ordinarily, people behaving like regular human beings would sidestep a lot of what makes the conflict occur. And what I really like so far about this book is that Sonea's continued distrust of the magicians and her refusal to be involved with them or even give them a chance to speak to her is so understandable and so deeply right feeling, even though I know that that the majority of the magicians, actually, I was going to say that there are some, but really the majority of them do not want to hurt her. The majority of them are more concerned with the safety of the rest of the city in the long term because of what she can do. But to her, she saw somebody get fried like a fucking egg, and then she overheard Faren, the worst of them, threatening somebody, saying that she was an enemy of the guild, and evicting a person. And we know that got reversed, and we know that they don't hold with that, but she doesn't know that. She doesn't, she hasn't gone and gotten an update because she's a little fucking busy right now. So when she gets later on in this chapter, and I'm going to jump around a little bit here, forgive me, but later on in this chapter, she gets a note, from Lord Rothan, which is saying specifically that they don't want to hurt her, that this was an unfortunate accident, that we just want to teach you. He's saying, and all of what he's saying, we know to be the truth, especially because he's the one saying it. Whereas if this same letter came from Faren, I would be like, well, I know everyone else feels that way, but not you. But she doesn't know Rothan. She overheard Fergan's response. She saw what they did to this person on instinct, all of them killing him. The reaction that she has is, I know what they really think. What they said when they didn't know I was listening is much more likely to be the truth. Which, yeah, it is. That's exactly the position that I would take. Is, oh, isn't it convenient for you to claim that what you did to that dude was a mistake and that you just want to help me? And, oh, yes, it's all about your concern. And I wouldn't buy that shit for a minute. So the way that she, wavers for a second and then she's like, wait a second. No. Yeah, that feels so accurate to me. So this is one of those instances that is really important to me as a reader, where an author sets up the conflict so well and has these moments happen. Overhearing Faren it doesn't feel like a plot contrivance. She's running throughout all of these chapters that we've read so far. She's hiding and going from place to place and overhearing all kinds of conversations. So it's not like she happened to overhear this one conversation and other than that, she hasn't no, this is one of a series of things that she's been party to and she maybe shouldn't have been. And it ties in completely with what she already saw with her own two eyes in the square. So this is just one of those things that I really appreciate the author managing to do this in a really believable way so that the beliefs that she has about all of this feel very organic and very common sense. It's not just that, well, I get why she feels that way. No, if I would totally be advising her to take this position were I one of her friends in the scenes with her, 100%, I would not trust, because the guild is just so disconnected from everything that it's sort of like the few bad apples in the law enforcement defense, where it's maybe that's true, maybe it's not the majority, but the few who are bad are so bad that the rest of them gathering what do they say? Gathering ranks, forming ranks. I don't remember, but they protect the one who's no good. And it's really frustrating, actually, that Fergan is the one that has already caused the problem, that she overheard him speaking specifically and being shitty to somebody else, that he's the one that's trying to get guardianship of her for reasons that are very unclear to everybody except I think for us. And maybe everybody except for Daniel, who seems to really know who he is. It's frustrating that Rothan is so willing to, I don't even want to say sweep under the rug, because that implies that Rothan knows more about Fergan than I think he does. Rothan is just naive and I think doesn't appreciate exactly who Fergan really is. He sees somebody that has a bit of a mean streak maybe, but is just essentially harmless and a lot of bluster. And it's a really dangerous thing, because whether or not somebody is dangerous to everyone in general, he might not be dangerous to the guild because he's not a very strong magician and he doesn't have a lot of power. He is still able to wreak havoc in individual lives and bully people. And the fact that he would want to bully people should be a real red flag that Rothan doesn't appear to want to look at. The fact that this guy evicted somebody from his home for having homeless kids staying in his attic. I feel like Rothan should be giving that a little bit more weight than he is. It seems like he's really able to brush that off as if it's a moment of pique that, Fergan was just frustrated in the moment with not finding this girl, and he just did something that was impetuous and shitty, but he didn't really mean it. And I really like Rothan. What makes you think that he didn't really mean it? Legit, honestly, what makes you sure of that? Because I don't believe that there is any world in which he did what he did and then he thinks back about a day or so later and is like, wow, that was really impulsive and I shouldn't have done that. That's not who this dude is. And I want to know where Rothan gets that he seems to think that is who this dude is. Whereas Daniel, we get a tiny bit more in this section of why he has some animosity towards Fergan, and it's not specific enough for me. Not in that I think it's bad writing, but that I just fucking want to know, and I want to know very, very specifically exactly what. Because when we're in Daniel's perspective, he's watching how determined Lord Rothan is to take on Sonea as his own student, novice. And he's a little touched by it because it reminds him of when he went through some shit. So what happened was that he was working with the magicians, and I don't remember if he was a novice at the time, and I could find that section, but I did not highlight it, which I should have done. But Fergan and him have like a little altercation, and Fergan winds up spreading a rumor about Daniel. And it's a very unspecified, like, we don't know what the rumor is. We don't even know what their argument was about in the first place. Like, and Daniel has, I relate to him so deeply in this moment. Daniel is so confident in the common sense of people that when this rumor mongering starts, he's not even worried about it, because he just really believes that anybody with a brain is going to see right through this, and they're not going to take any of it seriously. But he's wrong. He overestimates people's common sense. And he starts to realize that he's being treated differently by students, by teachers, by everybody. And once he realizes that this is happening, the damage is done. And there is no getting back the respect and esteem of everybody in the school and in the guild. So I guess he is a student here because he like gives up on his studies to a degree. Basically, it's just like, oh, well, you guys are all a bunch of fucking morons and I don't really want to be a part of this anymore. So what the fuck do I care? And oh my God, dude, I relate to that so much. Like, it's not a smart way to be. It's shooting yourself in the foot. It's, in this case, endangering other people because he might not learn how to control his magic any better, and he might turn out to be just the same sort of threat as Sonea is right now. But I get so resentful when people don't use their heads that I will shut down. Like, it's so difficult for me to cope with the reality of the fact that most people don't think things through or have the self-awareness to understand their own reasoning for believing what they believe, or they don't look at the possible agenda of where they're getting their information or whatever. And it makes me really like lose faith in everything in the system to a degree that I want to stop participating, which is not useful to anybody, least of all myself, but that's my instinct. So this section where Daniel's like talking about how he almost just fell off completely and like, you know, he had all this potential that he was about to waste. And I was like, oh man, I see myself in him so bad. And Rothan sees what's happening and steps in and takes Daniel under his wing and trains him himself and like really pushes him and proves that there's at least one person here that believes you, that doesn't think, you know, whatever this rumor is that's going around. Or even if I do believe it, it doesn't matter. Like, you know, God knows what it is, but, and that is part of why Daniel is like respects Rothan the way that he does. It's part of why he hates Fergan the way that he does. And I'm really wondering what Daniel's reputation is now, because we know the way that Rothan responds to him. We know the way that Fergan like ignores him when he's standing right there. So we've got those two individuals who were directly involved in his life. But I would like to know, overall, was he able to regain some of the respect of his colleagues and teachers once he began to apply himself again and like take the tutoring of Lord Rothan seriously? Or is Lord Rothan regarded as somebody who like takes in black sheep and, you know, does everybody view Daniel the exact same way, and now they view Lord Rothan in a slightly less auspicious light than they had before? Because that can happen, you know, somebody who stands for a person that nobody really seems to have a lot of respect for can sully themselves in doing so. Or, alternatively, they can have so much clout that the fact that they stand for somebody helps them out in the end a little bit. And I feel like I want to know this because it gives me more of a perspective of Lord Rothan's standing in the eyes of everyone. Because obviously, as a reader, looking at Lord Rothan from what I have read of him, he's the most kind-hearted of everyone. I like Daniel the best because he has the most, like, insight. I feel like he's much more cynical, but in a way that feels like it's appropriate. But Lord Rothan has, like, the purest heart, and I put that in quotes because that's a very subjective thing. And I'm just curious whether or not that actually means anything to the rest of the guild. You know, is that valued? Do they understand that's who he is? And, you know, in a lot of ways, I really understand and respect and think that it probably is best that Lord Rothan be the one that take on Sonea's training, but a little part of me wishes Daniel would take on Sonea's training. But I get that he doesn't want to do that because Daniel is not really about responsibility. It doesn't seem like anyway. But yeah, so that's some of what's going on, and the two of them are really trying hard to find her, and they get super close a couple of times, which I'll get into. But there is an interesting conversation between Lord Rothan and what is his name? This is going to kill me. The guy who is sort of in charge, Lorlan. Lord Rothan and Lorlan talk a little bit later, and Lorlan confides in him that Fergan is looking to take on her, to become her guardian. And Rothan is like, oh yeah, I know. Lorlan's a little startled by this and is like, well, you're very well informed. And he's like, yeah, not intentionally, but yes, I know about this. And he asks Lorlan, does Fergan really have a claim here? Like, how worried should I be that I'm going to have to fight this dude for her? And Lorlan's very diplomatic in his response, but if you read between the lines, it's pretty clear that Fergan has kind of as good of a case as Lord Rothan does, unfortunately, because Fergan, like, got bonked with the rock, which does seem sort of silly, like, oh, I felt the effects of it. But Lord Rothan didn't see her perform magic. He saw her expression and the way she was looking at her hands after the magic was performed. So him spotting her isn't because he witnessed what she did. It was just him making an inference and you know. So both of them don't really have, like, the most strong case. And so basically he's saying, yeah, you know what, Rothan, you maybe are a little in danger here. And then Rothan says, you know, I'll withdraw my claim if it's going to make things difficult for you. Like, choosing between the two of us, if it's going to turn into this whole big thing. If you prefer that I drop my claim entirely, I will. Which Rothan? Oh no, baby. What is he doing? Like, I get he doesn't know who Fergan is. But he does say, I think it's him later that is like, he probably wanted to break her down until she was just a meek, obedient novice, and that many others would think that was a good thing to do, like the right course of action. Which, Rothan, think that through, buddy. What does it mean to break her down until she's meek and obedient? What does that look like? Withdrawing your claim on her because you don't want to be a bother, when that could very well put her in actual danger, is a really, like, garbage thing to do, dude. And I get it. He's trying to respect protocol and, like, but seriously, just think for a second. I guess he just doesn't believe Fergan's capable. Like, he thinks breaking her down is going to be purely, like, by discipline. And it's like, yeah, but what does that mean, though? And there's, you know, a lot of thought too about, well, let me finish with Lorlan. So when he says this, like, well, if I withdraw my claim, like, is that easier for you? And Lorlan says, whether or not you fight for the claim of her, it's going to be very difficult for me either way. Basically saying, I do not want Fergan to have guardianship of her. That will be very tough for me. So if you fight for her, yeah, that will be tough too. But kind of like, buddy, just do what you're going to do, because either way, this is going to be really not easy. So I appreciated Llewellyn in that moment, because it indicates to me that he sees things a little bit more clearly than Rothan does. But yeah, there's also a thought process that Rothan has about the way that the dynamic between novice and instructor gets altered depending on how strong a novice's magic is. And I'm very curious, like, how they determine how strong somebody is, if this is a surprise to them, or because there's that moment earlier when the commoners are at the gates and they're trying to be like, oh, is this the person you're looking for, to Daniel? And he touches that one girl's hand and he feels this well of power that's untapped. And he's like, recognizes immediately that it's not super strong, but it's there. And I'm really curious how he knows how strong it is, like, right out of the gate. Is there no potential that can be grown and improved upon until somebody is far more powerful than anybody expected them to be? Or I'm trying to, like, compare something, like, you know, is it sort of like almost like a physical ability where, like, certain people just physically in sports are never going to be able to do certain things, no matter how hard they work and how much they practice. We all have specific limitations to our body that we can't break past. And is that how magic is? That, like, you know that somebody has like the power, but you can also assess what their limit is, which I find a little bit of a bummer, because that's felt like what was happening in that moment. And I'm not sure if I read it properly or if it's like, you know, but, and if it's the case that you can tell whether or not somebody is super powerful or not so much, that seems to tie into what he's thinking about, the fact that she probably wouldn't be placed with a magician like Fergan if anybody had a choice about it, because he's not very strong. And what she was able to do and how she's been able to hide herself indicates to them that she's got it going on a little bit, and she could outstrip him easily. And that makes the teacher look bad. And it also limits the student, because they're not being taught to their full capability, because the teacher literally cannot teach them to their full capability because they cannot accomplish that themselves. So Rothan, I'm assuming, is a stronger magician than Fergan, and I'm hoping that will be taken into account. But I also worry that if Rothan does not get custodianship, then Fergan will not only have a, like, personal grudge against her because of what she did, but then he will have the additional resentment of her being better at magic than he is, which I feel like is a real dangerous combination, and I don't want to see that at all. So yeah, there's just a lot at play here, and I really like that. Like, I feel like it would be really easy to make the guild the flat out bad guys, and, you know, have a sort of black and white attitude that everybody is sort of in agreement on. And instead it's a very realistic, like, they're kind of doing the best they can. There are some garbage people mixed in there that they have to, like, cope with and try and rein in, while recognizing that, like, we can't just get rid of this person. And yeah, there's also an interesting moment when Rothan is, like, he is giving everybody updates on what's going on, and he thinks about, like, just writing one daily update about the search for this girl that everybody can read, but he knows that everybody's going to think that there's probably some additional nuance that he left out of his report, and so they're all going to want to talk to him in person anyway. And when they're talking about Akaran, the High Lord, Akaran says, I have sensed someone using magic. Not much, and not for long. I believe she is experimenting alone, since a teacher would have instructed her to hide her activities by now. Rothan stared at the High Lord. That Akaran could sense such weak magical events in the city was astounding, even disturbing. As the man's dark eyes rose to meet his, Rothan quickly looked down at his hands. So that's interesting. Like, they're able to feel her when they're walking around. Like, they can trace her in the slums to a point. But apparently what Akaran can do from far away is really, like, quite a different thing. And he really, like, nails down what's going on. Like, he's saying that she's practicing by herself, that she doesn't have a teacher. And then later he says she's using magic in short bursts, sometimes a single occurrence, sometimes several over an hour. You would sense them if you were awaiting an alert to them, but you would not have time to find and capture her unless she used her powers for a longer period. So Akaran gives a very general location for where she is, the northern section of the outer circle. And Daniel again brings up that they should be in disguise. And Akaran says, cloaks should hide your robes sufficiently. And Daniel agrees to that. But then we see later that Daniel does not really, like, listen. He just goes and does. Because hiding your clothes sufficiently isn't really, like, you need to blend. It's not just, they can't, like, the robes themselves, the cloaks, should seem to be a giveaway. You know, so I appreciate how much more realistic Daniel is about all of this. So then let's talk about Sari. Faren, who is one of the leaders of the Thieves, is having Sari do a bunch of, like, odd jobs for him. And just generally, as we find out later, testing him to see what his limits are, to find out what the specific skill set of this kid is and how he can be used most effectively in the future. And this is actually kind of a fun section because I, despite myself, like Faren. Like, this is a dude who, he is sort of like Daniel in a lot of ways, that he's like got a real sense of people. He seems to have not only common sense, but like insight and is good at reading folks, which is really kind of a requirement if you're going to be doing illegal shit. And he is also like low key protecting like the disenfranchised and common people. For example, the first thing that he has Sari do is that there are a couple dudes who have been robbing shops, and they went into somebody's house and like beat the shit out of them also. And it's an interesting, like, I like that Sari asks specifically, like, what are they like? And the person who describes what these two dudes do makes sure to let him know, like, they're not like sadistic. They don't do this shit for fun. But they definitely like go hard. They're not pulling punches either. So I like that is something Sari asks ahead of time, that like, we're not, I want to know exactly what kind of mindset I'm dealing with here so that I know not only how to approach them, but also what will scare them. What kind of people are they? Because what Faren wants him to do is not kill these dudes. He wants these guys to know that the thieves are aware of their activities and know where they live. And basically, Faren's being really generous here. Like, he's saying, I'm aware of what you're doing, and I'm giving you the chance to back the fuck off. But I'm not going to kill you unless you do this shit again. Which, I mean, you can't ask for better than that in this sort of setting with dealing with a bunch of, like, with the criminal underworld, basically. Being given another chance is best case scenario. So what Sari does is he waits until these dudes go to bed. One of them is much more paranoid than the other. Like, he watches them leave this tavern, follows them back to their place. One of them is, like, completely oblivious, and the other keeps looking over his shoulder and keeps worrying. But despite looking over his shoulder all the time, he does not see Sari because he's not very good at this. And they get back to their place, and the one dude who's oblivious, like, falls immediately to sleep. And the other one is, like, pacing around and worried, and then he does something like kind of off to the side, and Sari can't quite see what it is, but then he gets in bed, and Sari has to stop and consider what he's going to do, because you could just slip a note under their door, but that doesn't really send the right message. It's not enough. And he decides that he's going to go inside and let them know, you're not safe in your own beds. We could easily have slit your throats in your sleep, and y'all would never have known. So he gets, like, very close to the door and manages to, like, check it by going in through a side window, because he can see that this dude had done something to the door. And when he checks it, it turns out the guy had, like, suspended a rake over the door so that it would fall and wake up this guy in bed if anybody tried getting in through the door. So he, after getting inside, he takes this note. I don't remember what it says. I'm trying to see exactly the spot. He picked up the knife and carefully pinned the paper to the table. I'm trying to find where it says, because I feel like he wrote it, didn't he? But in any case, he takes one of the dude's own knives that he has next to his bed for protection in case of an attack during the night, and he uses it to pin the note to the nightstand, which I think is just the most delightful. Like, I think Sari judged that exactly right. And he doesn't even, like, just leave and let them wake up to find it. He leaves and then slams the door really hard so that they wake up, and then sits and, like, listens to them completely flip out. And I found this very entertaining. Later, he has Sari do another job where he has to go and trade gold for this really gorgeous necklace, which they are all assuming is real, I guess. And the guy seems kind of, like, manic and crazy, the one that's selling. Sari's instructed to give the guy a decent price and to play it cool. And when he gets there to the place that they're doing the trade, it's a brothel. And the women are all just very kind of, like, freaked out, it feels like. He's led to a certain room where he's going to do the deal, and the woman who leads him there is, like, trembling. And when he comes out after doing the deal, he walks past one of the rooms, and the guy is saying to one of the prostitutes, we're never going to be apart again. And she looks over at Sari as the door's closing and has this look of real fear. And he goes out into the street, and Faren tells him how this dude broke into somebody's house, and I think it's insinuated that he raped her. It's not said, but he says something about how that she, like, it would not have been any better for her even if she had survived. So that's what I'm assuming, is that she was raped and murdered, and that it was brutal enough that even if she had lived through it, like, there was no coming back from what had happened to her, what this guy did to her. So Faren has like a very personal reason, not personal in the terms of that he knew this girl, personal in terms of he doesn't hold with this kind of bullshit. And so and this is part of what I loved about Faren. He tells Sari, I really want you to kill this guy. If you can't do that, okay. It bums me out because I want him dead and I really cannot do it myself. But what I'm doing is figuring out where your limits are. And I'm not going to toss you away or, go back on the sort of relationship that we have if you can't do this. I will just know that this is where you draw the line. And he's very like straightforward about it and sort of open in a way that I did not expect, that I really respected. And Sari tells him, I've never killed anybody before. And he says, I know. Like, he is aware of who he's dealing with. He knows what he's asking this kid to do. And that's why he's asking. Because he doesn't know if this kid is capable or not. If he's given the reasons that would make it feel more justified, will that motivate him? And even then, when Faren tells him this whole story, he's like, there is a flicker through Sari's head of he could just be making this whole story up. Like, I don't know that this guy did what Faren is claiming. But he thinks back to the way that the sex workers in this brothel were behaving and the way that the one woman was looking at him as the door was closed. And it lines up with the impression that he got from this guy while he was doing this deal with him also. So, and even that, Faren is like, no, you don't get to just believe me. You can trust me to a point, and I understand that might be difficult for you. And you're going to have to decide in the end how much you trust my version of events. Like, that's part of this whole thing, is can you, first of all, carry out these orders? And in the future, can you carry out orders like this and not ask questions? Because the fact that he asked questions to begin with is a tiny bit of a problem. Not really, like, it's giving Faren an indication of who he is, an assessment of what his values are. So in that respect, the fact that he asked is really important. But also, having somebody who's your right hand who will just do things and trust that you would not ask them to do something if it wasn't the right choice, that's invaluable. And until Sari can stop asking questions, that's not going to be his role, which I kind of think he would like it to be a little bit, as messy as that may get. So yeah, I just really like the fact that Faren's basically like, all right, look, if you can't do it, let's just go. I'll do it another day. Or like, I don't know. I'll just have to figure it out. And, Sari finally stops and he pulls out his knives. And he decides that he's going to go back inside. And we don't see what happens there. We just see Sari say, I'll be back in a minute. And Faren, sort of melt back into the shadows to wait for him. So I'm wondering if we will see that scene and, actually get to find out what happened. Or if it's just going to pick up later with, afterwards, Sari felt such and such. Or if we're going to get, little flashbacks or what. Because I kind of want to see how it went. And I also feel like if he does that and sort of saves some of these women from having to deal with this psycho guy again, that'll make him some friends as well. Which you can't have too many of those, right? So that's what's going on with Sari, which I found really compelling. Because Faren is just, I don't know, he's just got a really good head on his shoulders in a way that I very much did not expect. And we get to see a little bit more of that with Sonea also. So let's talk about her. She has been given pieces of wood to practice her magic on. And in another universe, this wood might be really worthless. But it's actually sort of expensive wood in this area because they have to have it shipped in. It's not like there are trees here. So it's just she's being allowed to practice on that simply because it keeps everything around them safe. Like there's, it's something that she can burn without it being a huge issue. And she is trying to either move it or light it on fire on purpose, and not a lot seems to be happening. And there is a really interesting, internal conversation that she has with herself. Every time the magic had worked, she had been angry, whether from frustration or hate for the guild. While she could draw those emotions up by thinking about something which angered her, doing so was exhausting and depressing. But the magicians did it all the time, she reminded herself. Did they keep a store of anger and hate inside to draw upon? She shuddered. What kind of people were they? Staring at the piece of wood, she realized that she was going to have to do just that. She would have to hoard her anger and gather her hate, storing them up for the time she needed to use magic. If she didn't, she would fail, and Faren would abandon her to the guild. Wrapping her arms around herself, she felt a smothering desperation rush over her. I'm trapped, she thought. I have two choices. Either I become one of them, or I let them kill me. A soft snapping sound reached her ears, a noise like a length of material being thrown into the air and quickly jerked back again. She jumped and turned around. Bright orange flames curled across the surface of a small table between two chairs. She leapt up and away, her heart racing. Did I do that? She thought, but I wasn't angry. The fire began to crackle as the flames multiplied. Sonea edged closer, unsure what to do. What would Faren say when he discovered his hideout had been burned? Sonea snorted. He'd be irritated and a little disappointed that his pet magician had died. Smoke was pouring upward and curling along the roof. Creeping forward on hands and knees, Sonea grabbed a leg of the table and dragged it forward. The fire flared with the movement. Flinching at the heat, Sonea lifted the table and threw it into the fireplace. It settled against the grate and continued to burn. Sonea sighed and watched the fire consume the table. She had discovered something new, at least. Tables don't burn into flames on their own. It seemed desperation was an emotion that would arouse magic as well. Anger, hate, and desperation, she mused. What fun it is to be a magician. I really like that section, because, that's a huge bummer. And I also like that detail of, thinking that Faren would not care if his hideout was burned, that he'd just be annoyed that he, lost his... And I think she's underestimating him there, but why wouldn't she underestimate him? Because she's hardly seen anything of him here, Meanwhile, above ground, when she, does this flare of magic, Rothan and Daniel are able to feel it. And they're able to zero in on shit a lot sooner than they had been in the past. And as they're doing this, Sari is coming back to his hideout, coming to see Faren, and he sees somebody who seems awfully well dressed, stopping and wandering around in the street. And then he sees him stop and stare down at the road. And then he realizes what's happening, and he sprints down. And he warns them all. And it's just in time because Faren is able to drag Sonea into this little side cupboard. Although I had thought it was a cupboard, but then it turns out that there's a way out of it, that they're able to run down this other hallway. So evidently it's a little bit more, but the way that you open it, it seems like you need to use magnets or something in order to get the handle out to pull the door open. And this makes Faren pretty confident that he's there's no way anybody's even going to know a door is here because there's no handle. And even if they knew the door was there, they can't get the handle out. But he forgets that he's dealing with magicians, so they can. And I skipped over the part where he gives her this book, and it's a book of magic that somebody smuggled out, that was supposed to be burned but wasn't. But Sonea can't read, and I really like the fact that he, like, sort of, when she points out, I can't read, he's like, oh, God, yeah, I'm sorry. I'll get somebody to help you. Like, he's very sort of sensitive about it. So anyway, but yeah, that's the other thing that's happening. And then she gets the note from Lord Rothan and tells Faren that she's not interested. And he says, all right, well, I will let them know ASAP that you are not interested, and that's fine. But then, yeah, they wind up hiding. Let's see. A section of the wall swiveled inward. Taking her arm, Faren pulled her into the shadows. After pushing the knot flush with the panel again, he closed the door. So this is when they see, and I think it's supposed to be Daniel here. He talks about, while they're hiding, that there have been more magicians around in the slums than usual. And then a figure suddenly strode into sight from one of the side rooms, his green robes swaying as he stopped. So I don't remember who's wearing green robes. That sounds like it would be Daniel, though, because he tends to be a little bit more flamboyant and wearing something colored. I don't know. Can he hear us? Faren murmured. I tested the walls many times. Perhaps he can see the door, Sonea suggested. No, he'd have to look very closely. Even if he did start looking for doors, there are 5 exits leading from this room. Why would he choose this one? And this moment is so interesting. The magician comes right up to the wall and is staring directly at Faren. Faren is like, how does he know I'm here? And Sonea says, I can hide myself from him. He doesn't sense me. He's sensing you. Can you hide me? Faren's voice was strained. Can you hide us both? Sonea drew away from the hole. Could she? She couldn't hide what the magician was sensing without detecting it herself. She looked at Faren. Then she looked at Faren. It was as if she had extended her senses. No, another sense that wasn't sight or hearing, and could feel a person there. Faren uttered an oath. Stop doing whatever you're doing, he gasped. Something brushed against the wall. Faren backed away. He's trying to open it. I was afraid he'd try to blast it down. That gives us some time. They had only taken a few steps when the sound of a bolt sliding across wood halted them. Faren turned and swore. He raised the lamp until its light illuminated the wall. One by one, the bolts were sliding back, apparently on their own. Sonea saw the cogs of the door mechanism begin to turn. Then the passage plunged into darkness as the lamp clattered to the floor. Run! Faren hissed. So I like this moment. Faren, he's a smart dude, but he's not used to dealing with magicians and accommodating what they can do in his security plans. So they get cornered at some point. And there's this magician, and this is Daniel at this point, I think, because we see later that he's talking about the smell. But this magician is coming at Faren, who, keeps on talking and luring him forward. And I obviously was caught just as much by surprise as Sonea is in the scene. Because she's yelling, stop, Faren, he'll kill you. If you want her, you'll have to come through me. The magician hesitated, then took a step forward, his palms turning toward Faren. A metallic clang filled the passage. The magician threw out his arms and vanished. Baffled, Sonea stared at the floor where the magician had been standing. A dark square had appeared. This is so great. This is some Looney Tunes shit. This magician tried to come at Faren in his own territory, not really thinking through that there might be some shit in place. And Faren lures him into the exact spot he needs to be, and then presses this thing that causes a trap door to fly open, and this guy goes shooting down a tunnel. And we find out later, at first he says something about how straight down into a pit filled with iron spikes. You mean he's dead? Very. Faren's eyes flashed. Suddenly she felt sick and cold. She had never considered that any of the magicians might be killed. Injured perhaps, but not killed. Sonea. Faren placed a hand on her shoulder. He's not dead. The trap leads to a sewage pool. It's meant as an escape route. He'll wade out of there smelling worse than the Tirali River, but he'll be alive. But consider what he would have done to you. One day you may have to kill for your freedom. Have you thought about that? And he doesn't stand there and make her answer him. He just says it and then walks away to let her sort of mull it over. And as they're talking about this, he's looking for another thing to get them out of here. And he accidentally presses the thing that is another trapdoor, and Sonea gets let down. So they wind up, it turns out, in the sewage pool. But the one that the magician went down was the garbage chute of the Ball brew house. After he wades out of there, he'll stink of fermented Tugor mash for a week. So, yeah, this is actually kind of a cute scene in that Faren is really trying to protect her in a way that I don't feel like it's just about the investment. I think he really does kind of give a shit that this girl is being put in the position that she is, you know? But yeah, I don't know. There's something about the dynamic between the two of them that I actually really liked. And I feel like that's about, I'm trying to see if there's, because we have a scene where Rothan is talking to Lorelin about how Fergan is the one that encouraged the novices to learn sword fighting in addition to doing, and I actually kind of like that because I feel like just relying on magic, I don't know if there's anything in this universe that can dampen or prevent someone from using magic, but having the physical ability to protect yourself in addition to magical ability feels like kind of an important thing. And also you just we all need to get exercise. And in that respect, I feel like it seems like a good idea as well. But Rothan doesn't really love it. And he sort of feels like we already have ways of destroying people and killing without having to add sword fighting into the mix. And I don't know why we need to do this, which I sort of respect that he feels that way, but it's just not just about destructive. It's, I think Laurelin points out that it improves their concentration as well, which is a good point because, exercise just does that as well. So yeah, I had forgotten to mention that because that's what leads into the conversation between Laurelin and him, where Laurelin says it would cause me no less trouble either way. And I'm trying to see if there was anything. Oh, right. Sonea's stepping into the room. Her heart leapt as she saw the smaller figure standing behind him. Sari! So she gets to see Sari for the first time in a while. And Sari had been starting to have some misgivings about the fact that Faren hadn't let him see Sonea for such a long time. But she's actually a little bit worried about the fact that Sari is getting involved with the thieves and feels like maybe he should take a step back and not do this. And Sari tells her that because she's blaming herself for his involvement. And he's telling her, everybody has always thought that I worked for the thieves, and I was able to sort of coast on that reputation. And I think it's time that actually be a real thing. I am making the choice to do this. She doesn't entirely believe that. But I appreciate that he is making the effort, that he seems to understand where her misgivings are. And also, he has seen her aunt and uncle, or Heron did. Heron and Dania found her aunt and uncle. And they are doing well. They actually are living somewhere better than the place that they were originally going to. And she's, they're just really worried for her, but they're being encouraging. And the fact that she's the one that the guild is looking for is pretty shocking to them. I don't think that even occurred to her, to the two of them. And I also do like the fact that she is, she has this conversation with Sari that it feels like they maybe should have had a little while ago, but you know how this is. It's all retrospect, where he's asking why she stopped hanging out with them. Because when she was younger, she used to, be part of their thieving. Like they would break into people's houses and like steal all kinds of shit. And it wasn't until she started to get older, I really liked this. She talks about how the boys in the group started to treat her differently and started to think that she was there for different reasons than she was. Basically, they were fuck zoning her, which is to say, thinking that a woman is in their midst because she wants to bang. Or at least that if she is there in their midst, that she should bang them. And it was a combination of being treated differently by people that she had thought of as her friends, which is just so heartbreaking and such a real thing. Plus, her aunt kind of talking shit about the thieves and the fact that they were dishonest and stole, and that's what she was doing. It got to her after a while. And she also appreciated that, that she didn't have to think about all of that stuff anymore when she went to live an honest life. Like, there was a lot of mental gymnastics that she had to live with. And that all went away when it just became the straightforward, go to work, earn a living, come home. Which I really appreciate that this is such a nuanced answer. It's not just like, well, I realized it was wrong. It was like, well, I had always known it was wrong, but I didn't really get it until I was older. And y'all were being real weird with me, and I didn't like that either. And Sari starts to be like, well, I wasn't like that. And then he's like, stops and thinks, and he's like, even if I wasn't, they were. And I have seen how some of our, quote, friends have been with women that we ran into on some of our jobs, and they weren't always great. And, I wish that every guy could, be as objective as Sari is right here, because his instinct is to get defensive about it. But rather than do that, he really stops and thinks about what she's saying and about the fact that, yeah, this, you know what? Now that you say that, I have seen evidence of that myself, which I guess I never really acknowledged, because it doesn't seem like that thought has sunk in until now. But, I appreciated that he's really as honest with himself as he can be in this moment. Yeah, she says, I had to grow up and stop pretending. Jana was always saying how honesty was valuable and stealing was wrong. I didn't think stealing when you had no choice was wrong, but that wasn't what we were doing. And, yeah, she says, you can still get into a lot of rub if you're not careful. The guards are the worst because no one stops them hassling you. He frowned as he tried to imagine her fending off over interested guards. Was there anywhere safe? Answer, Sari, no, there's not. Women have to deal with this garbage no matter where they are. And sometimes it's a little bit, you feel a little bit more safe, but usually not. So Sari just has a momentary insight there of just well, I guess that's just garbage all the time then, which, yes, it is. Congratulations. You've cracked the code. So finally, the two of them decide that they are going to try and get her out of the slums, because that's clearly where the magicians have zeroed in on, and it's not really safe for her anymore. So they're going to go into the city. And she is unprepared for where he brings her, because it turns out, and I love this little, they have to travel through some sewers that get flushed periodically, and they barely get out of them before the water starts rushing through. And I really enjoyed that detail. But they wind up in the fucking guild. He brings her into the woods of the guild. And she is just fucking flattened. She can't believe that he would have the balls to do this. And then he tells her that he has done this before. That he has been here before. Because they have, no security, because they're so sure that nobody's ever going to hassle them because they're the guild. And I love this so much. There's a moment where she even thinks that he's going to turn her over to the magicians, which I'm like, girl, I mean, why would he choose to do it in this way? Holy shit, there are so many easier ways to do this. And he has been running through literal sewers to hide you. Why would this be yeah. But, yeah, guess they think people are too scared of them to trespass. After I decided I would visit every place in the city, I came here and snooped around a bit. Couldn't believe how easy it was. I didn't try to get inside any of the buildings, of course, just watched the magicians through the windows. They've got places where they teach the new magicians and places where they live. I saw the healers working last time. That was something. There was this boy with cuts all over his face. When the healer touched him, they all went away. Amazing. And the chapter ends, they go through this stand of trees. It's like a woods or a park, I guess, kind of. Sonea hurried after and pressed her back against another tree. Her legs seemed to have lost most of their strength, and she felt lightheaded and dizzy. Sari grinned, then pointed through the trees. She looked up at the building before her and gasped. And that's the end of the chapter. So I haven't read any further, and I have no idea what this building is, if it's like the palace or what, but I'm really interested. And I love that this is where he takes her, because that seems brilliant to me. Like, not only will they never look for her there, but bursts of magic are going to be completely impossible to detect. And if she's able to, like, spy, she can get teaching without becoming anybody's novice. I don't know how effectively she can spy, but that's pretty rad, and I'm really excited about this turn of events. I don't know how long she'll stay here, but I feel like if they manage to set something up pretty well, this might be the safest place for her, honestly. So yeah. Is there anything? Who's in the chat now? We had Abby here before. Now, Patricia's here. Hi, Patricia. Is there any question y'all have for me at this point? Because I'm going to wrap this up if not. I just really thank you again to Ashley for commissioning this book. I've been really enjoying it. It's really interesting how many of these books all contain magic and yet how different the vibe is between all of them. And it's just been a lot of fun, and I'm glad everybody has such good taste, and I'm very interested to know how this goes. So, with that, I will bid you adieu, and I will see you soon with a new episode. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.